folks. So I know it's getting late, but I'm glad to see so many of you staying for the second session. I want to step back a minute and again provide some introductions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Zachariah Levine, and I am the Grand County Community Development Director. And the individual that just spoke is Greg Montgomery. He is the planning manager for the city of Ogden. And Justin Anderson is the city engineer and deputy director of public works for the city of Ogden. So I think this is a very timely presentation. The city of Moab is about to start its downtown plan. And many of you are aware of some large-scale changes that are happening in our community. And regardless of your position on what those changes are, there seems to be a palpable change of the way that Moab feels and where Moab is going right now. And so hearing from representatives in other communities about planning and development is really important. And this is really a case study. And so the value in tonight's presentation is not so much focusing really specifically on the dimensions of Ogden's story. It's about focusing on the process. Because it's really more about process than outcome. And so, Ogden has its own story, and Moab is currently writing its own story as well. And, what Ogden has done is embrace the rich history of its place. They've also created a really inspiring vision that they're working towards. And in Moab, we can do the same thing. We have a rich history that we can embrace, and we have an unending, set of potentials for the future that we can work towards narrowing the scope of and working towards that vision. And it's in part about changing the narrative from one of challenge and one of shortcomings to one of opportunity. And then creating that vision, creating a plan to reach that vision, and then executing that plan. And so what Justin will talk about is not so much the what, but the how. And so here we are. Justin, thank you for joining us, and thank you for staying.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. Before I get going, I want to do a quick little exercise to make sure I understand Moab better. If you have lived in Moab for 6 years, since 2010, could you stand up? You were here in Moab in 2010, stand up. Okay, now if you were here in Moab in the year 2000, stay standing. So if you were here in 1990, stay standing. 1980. And I caught Miko up there. He sat down too right there. So, no, thank you for that. It gives me some information on the diversity and everybody here in Moab, and just how many people from the outside. That's one thing I've noticed since I've been here. People from all over have come to Moab and have seen just how beautiful of a place southern Utah is. And like Greg said, this is iconic for Utah, is Moab. And so whether you like it or not, you really do represent the state of Utah in a lot of different ways. And I love the diversity here. So yes, I'm Justin Anderson. I am a civil engineer. I got an associate's from Weber State, and then I transferred up to Utah State and got a bachelor's in civil engineering. Then I also did my master's in civil and environmental engineering at Utah State. Loved Logan. It was great, and I'm really excited to hear you're going to be getting a USU campus built here soon. I think that's going to be great for your community. Just to give you a timeline, Greg talked about this downtown project, and that started going at about 2014, I think, is when a lot of these projects started taking off. It's 2014. We had a little bit start sooner than that, but only very few. But the housing projects really took off in 2014. And so we had an opportunity The LDS Church owned one entire square block in Ogden where their temple was, and they came out with plans to redo it. And they spent a lot of money beautifying that block. And the city wanted to seize that opportunity. And so we have, roads laid out in a grid pattern in Ogden, and it's really easy to get around in Ogden in that grid pattern. But one thing we wanted to do was to embrace the bicycle community in Ogden. We've been a railroad town forever, but that's not working for us. We need to do something different. And so we went on a road diet. And so we started a project called the Grand Promenade. And that was to change the road from being wide open, parking anywhere, to change it to not be vehicular friendly. So here's kind of some pictures of how it was before. Very wide, very open, all cars. Again, here is looking on Grant, looking south at the intersection of 20th Street. And you can kind of see there wasn't a lot going on with the buildings there. It just was just another street in Ogden that didn't have a lot going on. So we wanted to change that. And again, this is what it's looking like, today. There's off to the right, there's a development that sprung up almost overnight with apartments that Greg showed you. So what we look to do is in doing the street, we wanted to create a spot where we de-emphasized cars, and we wanted to make areas for people to walk and to bike and to do so safely. And we wanted to also make it beautiful. This is not a street where we wanted to make it, if you were in a rush to get somewhere, you want to be on. If you were in a rush, you could go a block to the east or a block to the west to get somewhere. This is a street, if you wanted to be on, you wanted to be there because it felt good. And you wanted to look at the beauty around you. And we also wanted to connect our river project from the river to the heart of our downtown, which is the Municipal Block and 25th Street. And that is our end goal. We have not completed that yet, but we are working towards having this style of street connect all the way from our River Parkway to our downtown. Again, it took a lot of thought to figure out. I'm showing this slide. This is our bike lane. And one of the things we wanted to do is create a buffer between the vehicles so that bicyclists and pedestrians could feel safe. They didn't have to worry about cars speeding by and being right next to them. But we also wanted to make it to where even our storm drain, how our water was collected, we thought through. We just didn't want to necessarily just dump it all in the streets or put inlet boxes everywhere. So we looked to actually put our inlet boxes behind the curb so the water could come in right there and you didn't have a grate that you had to ride your bicycle over. And we also wanted to utilize areas of where we could put the water, and that was with the vegetative buffers. Again, this is a picture of some of it. We had some beautiful trees that were already growing in the area. We didn't necessarily want to cut those down. My boss came up through the city as the urban forester, and so he likes his trees, and he has ingrained it in me that I'm going to be very careful when I'm dealing with his trees in the city. And so we wanted to work around that, but we also wanted to give the sidewalk and the pedestrian amenities a little flair, something different. So this is, we saw cut the existing sidewalks. It was in good condition, and we're putting in some concrete borders that were colored. Again, this is a picture of an intersection. So we completely tore up all of our intersections, and the utilities are very difficult to deal around when you're dealing with old utilities. We had water lines, sewer lines, power lines, storm drain lines. We had to work around and make sure that how old they were, that they weren't going to blow up on us. But we worked around them so that we could have our decorative intersections. Also, here's kind of a picture of the walls that we were building for our plannings, for our buffered bike lanes. This is infrastructure we put in that we plan on staying for hundreds of years. People aren't going to be able to come and change paint on a road. They can come change paint on a road very easy, but they cannot come and change this infrastructure that we put in. Again, you can also see some of the difficulties of some of the power lines and other infrastructure we had to work around. In forming these up and some things in dealing with stormwater, one of the things we did with our stormwater was we split it and ran it to all one side of the road, and then we had little notches in the roadway that the water would go into to these buffers. And that's where we wanted to collect all of our stormwater. And in the case we had a big storm event or something, we had one outlet that would go straight across into a storm drain. So we tried to limit those. Some other issues is our signalization. And I see your town and the road that comes through here, and getting the signalization and everything to work together. That can be very complicated. But what we did is we narrowed the lanes up such that you could barely fit one car each direction. And so when we come to an intersection, it would space such one leg had its own phasing, such you could turn left, go through, or go right. And so that's what we did, and we slowed up traffic. Again, here's kind of a picture of some traffic going through, but the other leg having to sit there because the left-hand turn's all queued out as well. Another issue we had to deal with is the interaction of bicyclists with vehicles and pedestrians. Right here, that old building that I showed you at first that looked abandoned and nothing going on, we have a charter school in there today. And it's a very well-attended charter school. And we had to figure out, this was the area of the drop-off for that charter school. And so we expanded the road a little bit right there, enough room so we could have a drop-off zone. And what we did is we made an area such that you could open your door and then walk straight across at an elevated plane. But the bicyclists, where that green is, that's to signal to them, hey, you're in a mixing zone. You need to pay attention to what's going on. Because whether it's bicyclists and pedestrians, it could be horses and motorcycles, it could be a lot of different things. But the idea is to bring those groups together to say, hey, you can live with each other and it can work out okay. So in these mixing zones, we try to do things to say, hey, you're in a mixing zone, pay attention. And it's the same thing if you're on a bicycle going across and it's an area where a car is going to be driving in on a driveway. It's painted green like this so that you can see, hey, pay attention to both the motorist and the bicyclist. And this is just kind of a picture of looking at an elevated crosswalk right across from the apartments if you want to walk across, and we use that to get people across the road, but also as cars going down the road, they needed to slow up going across this, so we used it to help control the speed as well. there's something to be said for curb appeal, and this again happened in 2014, and it just was something to help launch the rest of that development going on in downtown that Greg talked about. The next bunch of slides, the next item I want to talk about is the Ogden River restoration. Talk about what that is and what that meant to our community, because ever since the pioneers showed up in our community, unfortunately, as with the case with most rivers, it was a way of conveying waste, and the rivers became a nuisance. And how to deal with that, because it just created such a problem and nobody wanted to be there. So I like this slide from Walt Kelly. It was for Earth Day in 1970. And you see this beautiful forest with these great trees and really an area of such great potential, but you can't see it because of all the garbage laying around, and how helpless Pogo, this character, which I didn't know who it was. I had to have somebody explain who Pogo was to me. But how helpless he kind of feels in dealing with this plight. So, and the purpose and need of the whole project was to improve stream health, habitat and recreational opportunities. We wanted to do this in a number of ways, and that was one of the big ways was to establish a riparian corridor. So far, like an easement either side of the river, such was kind of a no-build easement, or an area that we could have trees and plant life and animals survive and live, because up until this point, people had just been building closer and closer to the river. But we needed to improve the stream health. The river as like most rivers, they become a nuisance because every once in a while they flood. And so the answer to that was to levee off the river, and it created a flat, muddy bottom, and it was not conducive to fish and macroinvertebrates and other insects to survive. And so we had to also deal with our water quality issues, and that was rivers are a conduit to send waste to. And so as storms would hit and all the greases and the oils and contaminations coming off roads, they eventually find the river. And so we had to deal with those in a way such that it just wasn't concentrating all at once in the river. But the other portion is this project started in 2010. It went from 2010 to 2012. And this redevelopment of the area that Greg talked about, it started, I want to say back in 2004, Greg, and acquiring land and trying to push to redevelop this area. It just didn't take off. And the thought was, we get the redevelopment to happen, and then we'll go fix the river. Well, it happened in a booming time, and 2008 hit, and it still was not going anywhere. And so we kind of shifted gears, and the idea is to go deal with the problem at the river. And so the one point, if you take anything from my slides I want to make, is that the economic development and ecological restoration, they are not mutually exclusive. They are tied together. And I think in your community, you see that. People want to come and see beautiful places, and with that they bring dollars and tourism and things like that. But in downtown Ogden, we couldn't fix this without dealing with the problems along the river. And everything I just said was really nice, but the real reason, nobody wants to live next to a dump. And that's what the river had turned into. All the fixes and the things they were trying to do, all the way back from the pioneers to deal with the flooding issues and the river moving a little bit, just created a mess. I mean, you can see tires. It created invasive species took over, and it was hard enough to get them to even grow in some of these areas, to get the invasive species, much less than the native species. Wildlife was not there, and it was just a ticking time bomb before we got more water through here and caused complete havoc and had the river completely moved. Some of the things that we dealt with, we were having over 3,000 tires almost, most of which had rims on them, in the river. We had whole cars in the river. We had over combined, I want to say, close to 14,000 tons of debris and garbage that we took out of the banks and out of the river that had just been going through there. And so as we shifted through everything, we actually had bots of about 22 boxes that went to cultural resources of things that we sifted through, but we went through a lot of garbage. And this is some of the things that we dealt with along the river. Just putting loads of concrete along the banks. Again, instead of dealing with the stabilizing the soils, it was easier to just shove something along there to quickly fix the problem. And again, looking at the banks, this was not just one location. This was an entire 1 mile stretch of river on both sides that had been done. And this slide is actually pretty funny in a way that we dealt with 9 cars like this in the river. They'd thrown them on the banks, and it just doesn't work. Eventually, the soil erodes away, the cars fall in, and there you have the banks that can, when high water hits, they'll just remove. And so we had quite an issue to deal with. And even though this was one location in the river, we sat there just pulling out debris and more debris. And it was just crazy. We had everything from cars to mattresses to water heaters. And it was just really sad to see everything, how the river had been treated for so long. And in doing this project, we, getting support from the community and getting people involved, everybody thought it was a good idea. They wanted to see the change. The hard sell was, could it really change? They'd go out and look at the river and see the same things you'd seen, and it was sad, and was it just going to be a big waste of money at the end of the day? So that was what we were having to overcome into doing this project. So some of the accomplishments that we did is we did restore 1.1 miles of river. We put in 30,000 plants and trees along the river. We created access points. We wanted people to be able to get to the river. We didn't want them random trampling all these plants, but we created some access points to say, come use the river, be able to get in it, be able to get by it. We wanted people fishing. We wanted people to bird watch. We wanted people there. And, we even created some physically challenged access ramps to be able to get all sorts of people down to the water to have that experience. Because in reality, the river did not look well in Ogden. But if you could have the vision to see through it, it is a treasure. And it is right in the middle of our town. So, one of the things we wanted to do is the existing floodplain on that 1 mile stretch was not quite 3 acres of floodplain. The river could hold 1,600 CFS in this stretch before it would go over its banks. And it had before multiple times. And so we established that riparian corridor. It added 17 acres of floodplain right in the middle of downtown. Buildings that were built on top of this were removed and demolished. We fixed in-stream enhancements such that the water could oxygenate itself. Right now, low water would hit, and in the wintertime, we'd go down to 10 CFS. That's how much this river would fluctuate. And in a flat, muddy bottom, fish, the DWR would come try to stalk it. The fish would either die or they would just immediately get upstream to try to survive. And in these low water times, there were no pockets for the fish or the macroinvertebrates to survive in. And we also established stormwater riparian areas such that all this stormwater that was getting collected off the roads wouldn't just be discharged directly into the river. We created kind of mini wetlands that the stormwater would go through before it would go into the river. Again, so here's some before and after shots. And I still can't figure out what exactly got dumped in the river to make that white line. But you can see, just construction debris was just continuing to be thrown in the river, thinking that that was going to stop the problem, and all it did was exacerbate it. But again, here is that same area, going through and properly placing structures to fix that problem. Again, we tried to use native rock, and we also tried to use trees. I mean, the biggest thing is we tried to use trees and natural vegetation. In fact, I like telling people that we just weren't throwing our garbage in Ogden. we were throwing the whole can. It was just getting chucked in. And that's a mindset we had to overcome, is to tell people, hey, it's not okay. This is something you want to treasure and take ownership of. Again, getting rid of that vein and redoing it, you can see how it looks. Again, these stormwater return areas, here's an area where we tried to capture stormwater before it got discharged directly into the river. And that's how it looked before it was built. And since then, we've had natural vegetation fill in with cattails and other plants that will buffer those pollutant sources. Again, here's some of the access paths that we created to get down to the river. Here is, we realized we couldn't make this river everything to everybody, but we wanted to make it have something for everybody. And so here's an area that we looked at. We actually made a kayak wave in this area. We kind of made a platform and things for people to come play in the river. And so here's what it looks like. And so, we don't have this great big Colorado river like Moab has, and our kids can't afford to go jump in a car and drive and go learn how to kayak or paddleboard. So we tried to make something right close to them that they could drag their kayaks or paddleboards down to. Again, here's a picture of an art piece that was installed along the river. And going around, I really liked Moab. I saw you guys in your one park down there. You incorporated some things that we did with this art piece, and that was educational components to teach people water is a precious resource, and that we need to take care of it, and that we need to teach our kids to take care of it. Because I can tell all of you how important that is, but you're not going to listen to me. The impact that I can make is on kids that are about 4th grade. That's the target that we want, because we'll get them to change behavior patterns, and guess what? They are very good at getting mom and dad and grandma and grandpa to change too. And so we use that to our advantage to teach that. And so this whole water cycle is built for kids. So they can go spin that wheel, water comes out of that sculpture, and it comes down and built into this rock. As you can see fish, you can see leaves, you can see insects. And they can learn how to take care of it right there. In fact, I love this picture because you see those little girls there spinning that wheel and water coming down, but in the background you see a fisherman too. And we have some great interaction of everybody. Again, and also on this art piece, I love it because on the winter solstice, that sculpture of birds up on top at noon forms a snowflake on the back of that. And so it really is beautiful. And there's on that rock that it's on, it shows carved out of it is the drainage area of the Weaver River drainage, which the Ogden is a part of. Again, these were all dilapidated homes right through here, this whole area. In fact, this is a picture. The art piece was one of the first things to go in after the river was restored. And one of the next things was what we call the High Adventure Park. We had playground equipment. This is our highest used park. In 2 years that it was built, the numbers of use of kids blow every other park away. Again, this was all area right along the river where homes and other things were that were dilapidated. And here's kind of a picture of the river as it was being restored. As you can see on this side, there's not a lot of trees on that one side. There was not many native trees that we were able to keep. Everything was either dead, dying, or an invasive species. But we were definitely concerned of sooner or later we're going to have high water. And in 2011, just shortly after we had done this, we experienced that. So I'm going to show that again to you. So it went from there all the way to the top. And we designed this, and it actually was really good for us because in some ways in the back of your mind, you're thinking, is it going to work? And we'd gone through all this design, and we got to find out immediately if it was going to work. In fact, typically 1,600 cubic feet of water would come through here and overflow. We experienced almost 3 months of over 2,000 cubic feet going through this area. And it matched, we figured that would match the 100-year floodplain. Again, the cars and everything else had slowly just levied off that river and made the carrying capacity so small. But by opening it up, what used to be the problem wasn't a problem anymore. It could handle the water coming down. And here's another area showing the high water coming up along the trail. Again, there's the same area just in low flow conditions. One of the important things we did too is, and this was actually started before we started the river restoration project, is we looked to establish a trail along the river. We wanted people to get out there. It was still a sketchy part. In fact, when we did the restoration, we had to remove that trail and we put the trail farther back off the banks. But we still had areas where you could get in close to the river. And this is a picture of the stormwater return area. We diverted waters instead of having it go directly into the river. And this is a bunch of UTA property. So they had a big hub right here next to the river. And they had a huge parking lot. And when it would rain, all this water would come straight into the river. We caught that water, diverted it over, and sent it through a stormwater return area, which was right next to the river, and let all those pollutants settle out prior to being able to be discharged. And this is just a section of the river that we used. I fell in love with these core logs, and all it was is we were able to use soil lifts on them. They were made in America, which we got some federal money with this project, and so we had to meet the Buy America Act, and so this product was absolutely fantastic once we got it installed, and it held through the flood. And here's a viewing deck that we tried to install so people could come and overlook the river. And right next to this viewing deck, we have another stormwater return area and a boardwalk. We also had all these cars, too. I heard there you kind of had a car problem some places in Moab. Well, we have car bumpers in Ogden, and so that's where they end up. And it was a chromium replating plant right there. And so we worked with them. We scooted all those bumpers that were right on top of the river off the river, and we built a stormwater return area right there. Okay, and here's kind of a picture of some of the elevated boardwalks that we installed. And here's a picture of kind of a final product of that boardwalk looking east at our mountains. We had a lot of partners when we did this, and we had water quality, we had Trout Unlimited, private landowners, Habitat Council, and after we finished this restoration, our river right through here was designated as a blue ribbon fishery. They came back in, re-looked at what it had done to the neighborhood, and we received that designation. Again, we even had an Army Corps of Engineers as a partner, which is crazy because when we started out the project, it wasn't going so well with us and the Army Corps of Engineers. And a surprise, surprise. But the point I want to make with this, though, is through sitting down and having some discussions and understanding their point of view and having them be able to then understand our point of view, I gave in, did some things that cost the project some more money that I didn't think we should have to do. However, by that collaboration and meeting, I think, in the middle, near the end of the project, where we were running out of money, it was the Army Corps of Engineers that came and brought money to the table for us on mitigation funding. And so I think that was really key. An agency that is not known to play nicely, but by working with them and understanding their point of view and communicating our point of view, we were able to, accomplish what they felt needed to be accomplished, and then the money that I spent on completing their portion, they refunded in another way. And one of the last things that we did is this river through here, the city does not have enough money to keep it pristine. We just don't. It takes a community to take ownership. And that's what we wanted to take place, is to have It's not my river, it's not your river, it's everybody's river. And it's going to take everybody stepping up to the plate to take care of it. And so in 2004, we established an Adopt a River program, much like an Adopt a Highway, where we get groups that will come in and take ownership of sections of the river. They'll come pick up trash. If they see issues, if they see a shopping cart dumped there, they'll notify us so we can come get it out. And slowly but surely, the element of littering and some of the other problems that we've had with people and how they've treated the river is dissipating. And the community is who is taking ownership. And one of the things we did is we brought in a fly fishing film tour. And so we show it at the Ogden Egyptian Theater, and we use the proceeds to help fund this Adopt a River program. So I'm going to show you a video right here. This was done with the help of some people from the Division of Wildlife to help show the community. It's not just about showing up, it's about getting informed. It's about doing your part. It's more than just taking care of your little world. It's about taking care of this river. And when everybody has that mentality of what it'll look like. that's the end of our presentation, but this slide is Christmas Village in Ogden, and it's amazing when the community comes together and they work with local governments of what can happen. So.
Quite impressive, I might say. Before we get to our question and answer period, I want to once again thank SEAS and the League of Women Voters for making tonight possible. And thank you again, Justin and Greg, for coming down and joining us here. So clearly, Ogden has its own story, but there are certainly some transferable elements as well. You heard them talk a lot about infrastructure, economic development, housing, a lot of the big challenges that we know we're facing in our community. And this is one model for how to address those. But it all started with a vision and a plan and executing that plan. And so, to that end, I'd invite the audience to ask questions of Justin and Greg about the process or the vision or any element of their story that caught your attention. And we'll probably stay for about 15 minutes, and then I'm sure that they'll hang around a little bit at the end if you have individual questions.
I noticed the Echoes Foundation was a partner on the river project. Were you able to have any success in attracting their corporate donations or foundation grants to downtown planning and development?
Okay, so the question was about the restoration of the river and the role that the Eccles Foundation played there, and whether there was any investment from them or other corporate donors to the downtown area.
Well, with the Eccles being originally from Ogden, there was that commitment. A couple projects that went on was, one of the things we tried to do downtown was trying to get the restoration of a theater, the Egyptian theater, tied into that. And we figured out, how can we do this? If the person wanted to demolish the theater, the community figured out, okay, how do we step forward? Well, part of it was, let's get Weber State involved, let's get the county involved, and then let's look for some money to help do it. The conference center is called the Eccles Conference Center. We got them involved also to help donate, to work towards that complete restoration, not only of the theater, but of the conference center. And we've always tried to work with the Eccles Foundation to work on various projects, and so they've always had a part in helping us in many ways. Just like any other thing, they always have a lot of people going after money from them. But we've always been able to create this partnership, I think, partly because of David Eccles was from Ogden, and one of his homes is the Eccles Art Center now. And so they've been involved in a lot of different projects in Ogden, both there and in Weber State itself, too.
But one of the things I think that was important is selling them on what we were trying to redo, like on the river. Because for the community to take ownership of it, I mean, they are the community. They help found, I mean, they're the roots of the community. So to have them be a partner in it lets everybody know this is important to the roots of our community. It should be important to you too.
Here, funding, I'm so curious where these pots of money came from to accomplish these amazing things. For example, you said that you actually built some houses. Where did that pot of money come from?
Okay, so just in case you're wondering, I'm repeating the questions because we are recording this session and we want to make it clear for those who weren't able to join us. But the question was about funding. How has Ogden City been able to turn this vision into a reality, because we know that money is an important factor there?
We found this rainbow, and at the end of it, was this pot. Part of the funding came about because because of our poverty level, qualified for housing and urban development block grant monies and home monies. Those are two federal programs. And so we could leverage our own city money through some different things. One was, I talked about redevelopment districts. Redevelopment districts carry with them a certain earmark of money that has to go to housing. So we'd leverage that housing money from a redevelopment district together with block grant money and home money to then apply to it, knowing that we would never make a return on our investment, money-wise, but in changing the community's thought about the community and attracting people who live in an area. People say, oh, I don't want to live there. Getting new homeowners involved, that was worth the fact that we would not recoup money. We would take a loss. But in the end, we would make a gain for the community betterment. And so we would create those different programs to fill in those gaps of whether it being, cutting down units. We've actually even done, we go to the legislature, we beg, we're not proud. We got a program approved last year for a unit reduction program to take some of these houses that they cut up into these deplorable living conditions to try to improve the quality of life. And the legislature gave us $3 million to go towards buying out those units in what we call a unit reduction program and get the homes back into a stable state that they're livable and look at the condition of people's lives. We also then, early on, created a revolving loan fund. The city earmarked a certain amount of money. We said, okay, we'll apply it. And over years, we know as people pay it back, we can then reinvest it again and again. So we created a revolving loan fund also. So we try to look at different areas of how can we leverage the little money we had with other programs that may be federal or maybe looking for special one-time money from the state or other types of things to try to accomplish that. Because one of the things I didn't mention is that we felt the state created some of the problems we had in housing with encouraging the halfway houses and everything else to locate in Ogden and then drive people away. We said, you have some responsibility. Help us rebuild the neighborhoods. So, yeah, we weren't proud. We'll take money from anybody. And those are the ways we started to approach that.
And I think it's important to follow up with what Greg said, because when he said take a loss, that was we invested some of these money to deal with some of these problem areas, but at the end, we wanted to raise the property values of the surrounding homes. And I know Moab doesn't have property tax, but in Ogden we do, and so the idea is by fixing these dilapidated or these problem areas and getting property values to rise up, it could actually help break even with the property tax.
My question is, as you did these renovations, as you turned around these homes that had been neglected so long and were home to many people, did the low-income people still stay there? What happened there? How did you encourage and support them when you're turning this around in a way which is wonderful, but it's got to make it so it's got to be very hard for them to afford. So where'd they go and what happened there?
So the question is about how to execute this vision about neighborhood revitalization and protect current residents from all the changes that are happening around them. How do you improve a neighborhood without forcing some residents to leave because of increasing property values?
So two things I think are important to understand. One is the living conditions that some of those people were in. And one of the things when we use what we call the block grant money, for the one project near the river where we had to just clear cut and scrape everything down, we, as part of that, pay for relocation of those individuals to a new house that then is in a better condition. Some of them choose to take that relocation and move to another area and not stay in that right location, but they all upgrade into a better house than what they had before. That was part of our relocation money that took place. Another part of it, I think was, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not, I can't remember if it was earlier or not, Ogden, in terms of low and moderate income housing, has a surplus of 4,000 units over and above what population size we have and would expect to have. And so it was not difficult to find something to still meet their income, but we always wanted to try to improve the condition because we didn't want them to get into a worse living condition than they were before. And so in this relocation process, we're always trying to give them the opportunity to find a better place so that they could raise their living conditions and not be stuck at one level. And so while people looked at, well, you came in and you did this, we only had, I think, of the 150 homes we revised and we took out in that river project area, we only had one person who felt bad about it. Everyone else was excited they had an opportunity to upgrade and improve themselves. Now, if we would have said, okay, we're taking it, you're on your own, it probably would have been a different story. But that had to be part of how we approached that.
And to follow up with that real quick, blight is an ugly word, and it's hard to talk about in your community. But if you don't do something to stop that blight from spreading, those other people whose homes, their value are going to continue to go down. And so they are losing their investment. So if you don't do something to stop that blight, you're not helping them.
You mentioned, when you talked about in town, that you had certain leverages over what executing your plan. Can you elaborate a little bit on the leverages that the town had?
Okay, so the question was about the downtown revitalization, and during the presentation, Greg talked about points of leverage that the city had over developers to create the type of development that Ogden City wanted to see, and this gentleman would like Greg to expand on the types of leverages that the city actually held.
I want Justin to first talk about our infrastructure and its age and what that creates, and I'll kind of add on to that to help address that.
Okay, Ogden City, again, started out booming. Things started building well. Well, our infrastructure didn't get fixed. It stayed in the ground. Things kept building. Well, the 50s came along, they kept building more. And so this infrastructure, this network of feeding water, dealing with sewer, what to deal with storm issues, was buried. It comes a point that it's buried no longer. It will surface, and it becomes very difficult to deal with. And so some of it is taking a proactive stance to say, all right, you're going to be developing, but you've got to meet certain standards. You've got to have so much pressure to your development. You have to have so much flow. You have to have so much storage. And so taking a proactive stance with the city, that gives you some leverage for the fact that they're not having to build out all these utilities, and they're not having to fix it either. So we have some leverage that way. But if you don't deal with your infrastructure, it's going to catch up to you, and it's going to cost you a whole heck of a lot. If Ogden City would have, back in the 50s, started raising the rates a little bit, I'm not saying a lot, but raise them a little bit incrementally, and started dealing with the problems back then, it wouldn't come to the year 2008, and we're having a bond for $50 million or $100 million and raise rates dramatically. It would have been fixed all along the way. So that's one of the issues.
So with the river project especially, as Justin mentioned, I think you may talk about those storm return areas. We designed those specifically so as the development is going to take place, rather than using their land to hold and contain water, they could take advantage of the storm return areas. But again, that became part of that leverage, saying, okay, you don't have to use as much land for storm retention at. So here's one thing we can do for you, but this is our expectation, because I think we even reduced the storm water rates. So what they're charged annually is reduced because of that location. The other thing is we bought key properties that we knew were needed for development to happen. And so we said, okay, you want your development, you do have to acquire these properties. We will deed them to you, but here are the conditions of what has to happen in order to make that work. So that became the second leverage. And then the third leverage that we talked about was some of the infrastructure improvements we made to the systems to be able to handle the new development. Again, which is a cost normally they would be bearing, but again, to try to get them there and say, here's another incentive. We looked at that. The final thing was, in the river area, we did what we call the mixed use zone, which basically is, here's the concept plan. You show us how you're going to meet this concept plan. If you do that, then we'll create the zoning around your project, and your project will become its own zoning standards, rather than saying strictly this is this, and you have to meet it no matter what. We gave them that flexibility, say, okay, here's what we're trying to achieve. How would you envision to do it? Then we'll create the ordinance to fit around it.
Okay, so let's take one or two more questions, and then you can meet individually with Greg and Justin.
I'm really curious, what are your impressions of downtown Moab?
Okay, so the question is, what are your impressions of downtown Moab?
I'll tell you what, as coming in as an outsider, as you drive down the street, I mean, it's cool to see all the shops you have along your street. But I'm also realistic in what I'm looking at as an engineer for another city. That's your main thoroughfare coming through the city. And that in itself can cause some problems. Having all your heavy traffic go right through the area you're trying to make walkable. So if you're trying to expand your sidewalks to make more room for pedestrians or more room for pocket parks or on curbside restaurant seating, it becomes very difficult. I noticed that. I also think, I saw some ATVs going around on your roads, and that's probably different. We see that, I think, a little bit in Ogden, but we don't see them on Washington Boulevard or Wall Avenue, which is kind of our main drags. So I get there's some issues that you got to see there. I think at one point in Ogden, you'd see a lot of horses downtown, but that hasn't been the case for a while. But you look around, the surrounding setting of this valley is gorgeous. And I think if you keep building upon that, and I think being such a bike-friendly area, I think is a good thing. I know it's good for Ogden. And there's an education piece in Ogden too with bicyclists and motorists. They kind of don't get along, but they need to. They need to start learning how to get along. And because we can't just keep building roads and more roads and more roads and more roads. So at some point, people are going to have to walk and bike to get some places. And it's okay if you have to park and walk a block somewhere. And I do think that you have opportunities of maybe building off the main drag, some settings where you can make it more walkable and bikeable, and it'll give you an opportunity of building some additional restaurants or some additional shop fronts. I think you do kind of have a parking problem at times in downtown. I think you can see that. However, having a parking problem is not always a bad thing. There was a time in Ogden, we wished we had a parking problem. But I do think that we're getting more and more of a parking problem, and that's not a bad thing either.
And I think one of the things I've noticed as far as, the main street and that is maybe the lack of dimension for people to walk. With the road width the way it is, there's not a lot of room to take advantage of sidewalks and things that have the sidewalks. It's crowded a little bit. Crowded is not bad because it does give you a feel of activity. It's just kind of that conflict between what's happening on the street and then what's happening on the sidewalk. I think it's difficult when the dimensions are so small. On Washington Boulevard, for example, our sidewalk widths are 20 feet wide. And clearly that's Highway 89, like I said, but there's a 20-foot wide sidewalk between the business and the street, which gives you opportunity to do things. It's a little narrow here. I think you've got a central core that is really what I call the urban fabric of buildings that are close to the street. There's not gaps between them. I think those are important to get people to move back and forth and create activity. And it's that activity that makes a place feel like it's cared for, like there's something happening here. And I think that's a good thing that I see happening. When I see those sidewalks crowded. For example, if I remember right, a lot of sidewalks in New York City aren't more than 8 feet wide. And they end up having a lot of activity happen on that. So that activity I think is a good thing. But I think what Justin said about the parking, some of those type of challenges are things to work at, and the truck traffic that goes down that street is a deterrent of saying, why do I want to eat out on the street with the noise from the trucks on the street also? And so trying to work and adjust those things, and maybe have the, whether the sidewalk cafes and that are on the side streets, or looking for other opportunities to create that feel, is something there, because you're going to have that truck traffic given the limited width of the valley, and that being the main road in and out.
I will say this, I didn't see anything that I didn't think could be fixed. It wasn't like, oh, it sucks to be them on that, right? Every community has problems. There's things that we wish you could get better. But it is getting a group of people together, like you have tonight. It is talking about the issues, collaborating, thinking about those issues, and then coming back to try to fix them. This has happened with me and Greg a lot. We don't see eye to eye on everything. I mean, some things we do, but there's some things that we butt heads against pretty good. He's a little bigger than me, but I got him by a few years. But that doesn't mean we get in a closed room and we get timid with each other. We lay things out, we discuss our points, we stick with our points, and then I've noticed, all right, we go away from that, and we come back a while later. And after having thought about it, I draw closer to his points, and he draws closer to my points, and sometimes we even pass each other, and so that's a good thing. And so there's nothing here in Moab that I didn't see as something that could be overcome and accomplished. But it does take people getting involved and being informed.
This question is actually sort of for you, Zachariah, and along with that, your work with these gentlemen and hearing about these education and also your experience working with us in here a lot. I'm curious what these inspire you and what kind of opportunities you see for us moving forward.
Sure. So the question was, what do I take away from Ogden's story, and what do I think is transferable to Moab? And for me, the biggest takeaways are two words: vision and collaboration. I might throw in a third word of persistence. Ogden's story is really about vision. It's about a community coming together and establishing a vision for itself and working towards that vision. But to bring that vision to life, it took quite a bit of collaboration. You saw in their presentation how many development partners were required to bring that vision to life. And in Moab, we have a very invested community. We've got a very diverse community. I don't think anybody in this room would say that Moab is homogenous in its development views or political views, but that's okay. As Justin and Greg just said, I mean, you don't need to see eye to eye on everything to make something happen. And they have changed the narrative from one of down and out to one of up and up. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to continue changing that narrative from down and out or challenge or we can't do this or we can't do that to self-determination, and we can do this and we can do that. I work for the county. I'm in the public sector. I've worked in the private sector before this, though. But a big takeaway for me is that as part of that collaboration, there's an opportunity for the public sector and the private sector to come together. In each of these legs of the story, the public sector, the city or the county or the RDA played a pivotal role at one point to make seemingly impossible development come to life. But at some point the baton was passed as well. Neither entity, neither sector, so to say, bore took on the entire responsibility for making something happen. And so, that's the overarching theme that I see going forward in Moab, is finding those opportunities for collaboration and symbiotic development that it's beneficial to, both the public sector or the community as a whole and private sector interests. Because, what makes Ogden a great place to live for its residents is also what's attracting the tourists and the investment dollars and the corporate recruitment. And so, to the degree that we can focus on things that would make Moab a great place to live and work and play is also going to benefit our tourism industry and our other forms of development. With that, I'm going to say thank you once again to League of Women Voters and to